The persecution of Buddhism during the Tang Dynasty. China's history is comprised of many different reigning families, all of which are recognized as being a dominant force during their time of power. Of all of these, the Tang Dynasty is considered to be one of the most remembered dynasties. While renowned for its strong military, structured political system, and organized social economy, the Tang was also well known for the persecution of Buddhists during the years of 842 through 845. During this time period, China had been struggling economically, which allowed for Wu Zong, the reigning emperor during that time, to use Buddhism as a scapegoat to collect money. While many criticize his actions, it's interesting to notice that the Buddhist decline also allowed for other religions to become noticed. Either way one looks at the situation, the Emperor Wu Zong and the Tang Dynasty play a huge role in determining the outcome of Buddhism in China. The Tang Dynasty reigned over China for nearly 300 years between 618 and 907. While their military power and social economy grew strong, the most important characteristic had been improved with its political system. A centralized administration had been formed and the majority of power was taken away from elite clans. This centralized administration broke off into many branches, which in turn allowed for there to be a less hierarchical governmental system. With a less hierarchical governmental system, people began to feel more involved and important because the government was locally spread out. The ability to reach out to everybody brought a sense of unity to China and allowed all classes to feel more equal. These changes were heard abroad, bringing many new immigrants from all different places. The exceeding population growth, due to the many immigrants, also brought in a wide variety of new religions. During the Tang Dynasty, Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, and foreign religions such as Christianity, Judaism, and Hinduism were amongst the most dominant and popular. Of these three religions, Buddhism started to pick up extremely fast and seemed to be surpassing all other religions in China. Arthur Wright explains that Buddhism appealed to so many people because it was offered to everybody. Buddhist monks had been the first to open free dispensaries, and in times of disease outbreaks, the clergy would provide safe areas where people could be treated. Just as the Tang's new and established political system appealed to everybody, so did Buddhism. During this time of rapid growth, many Buddhist schools and temples were going up all over the place. Everything seemed to be great for those practicing Buddhism in China, but unfortunately for them, Emperor Wu Zong became leader of the Tang Dynasty just as Buddhism started to reach its popularity peak. Wu Zong took over the Tang Dynasty in 840, which wasn't the best of times for China. Wu Zong was the successor to his older brother, Wenzong, who was under house arrest the previous 5 years. During this time, the military had been falling apart and the country was being attacked from the northwest. Economically, they were doing very poorly because many provinces weren't paying taxes. They felt that they were being forced to pay too much. Wu Zong needed to act fast before the Tang Dynasty would be overthrown. To make back money, he realized that Buddhists were his only window of opportunity, so he took advantage. Wu Zong felt no remorse taking advantage of Buddhists because he not only could prosper from their wealthy monasteries, but he could then finally see this growing religion come to a stop. Wu Zong demanded that all gold, silver, and other priceless items within the Buddhist monasteries be turned over to the government's possession. Arthur Kenneth K. S. Chen claims that those who practiced Buddhism were being mistreated even before the climax of the persecution in 845. In 844, we already saw that monks were not only told to stop teaching, but any foreign monks without their monk certificates were kicked out of China and forced back to their native country. By the year 845, over 4,500 Buddhist monasteries were hindered, and just fewer than 50,000 private Buddhist monasteries were abolished. over 40,000 Buddhist temples laid waste, while nearly 300,000 monks and nuns were told to stop their teachings and practices. Luckily for Buddhists, this abuse only lasted for a limited amount of time. Wuzong died in 846, and his successor, Zhengzong II, turned out to be one of the most revolutionary emperors in the Tang dynasty. Instead of taking advantage of the Buddhist religion, Zhengzong II looked into other ways that could dig China out of their financial slump. He worked on getting back a centralized administration in order to keep a structured government. Then, instead of letting the Buddhist community be, he went to great length to get Buddhism back up and going again. He devoted a lot of time to rebuilding temples, monasteries, and schools. Around the same time, Buddhist worshippers also had found out that Chinese pilgrims had traveled to India to spread Buddhism, and it was growing in popularity. With the new emperor taking over and a renewed rise of Buddhism, it looked as though the Tang dynasty and Buddhism in China would be around for an infinite amount of years. Unfortunately, this was not the case. Emperor Zhengzong II ruled the Tang dynasty until he died in the year 859, where he was then replaced by Yingzong. Yingzong turned out to be a very lazy leader and paid more attention to women instead of the country. His reign would last for 14 years, but unfortunately nothing was accomplished, and the dynasty seemed to be falling under his rule. Only 2 more emperors would reign after Yingzong, both of which had struggles holding the country together. The government and political system were withering away, which led directly to civil wars. Due to the emperor's inability to keep a structured government, most of the peasants went on their own rebellion. They were extremely fed up with the taxing laws and decided to either stop working or stop paying taxes. No one was able to do much about this because the government was too busy focusing on all the civil wars. This peasant rebellion drove the Tang dynasty bankrupt, and in 907, their reign over China ended. Throughout the rest of the Tang's existence, Buddhism lay dormant and was still waiting for its time to peak again. With the Tang dynasty replaced by the Sui dynasty, many felt that Buddhism could jumpstart itself to the growing force that it once established before the 845 persecution. Despite all the worshippers who were anxious to get everyone on the Buddhist bandwagon, it just wasn't going to happen. After the persecution of 845, Buddhism never played such a dominant role as it once did in China. As more people came into China, more foreign religions were being practiced, and the teachings of Taoism and Confucianism seemed to make Buddhism look pretty plain. In fact, the Dhyana or Chan and the Pure Land tradition schools were the only 2 Buddhist schools to succeed after the persecution. In lecture we learned that the Pure Land tradition school worshipped Amitabha and sought his grace for deliverance from this world under the notion that salvation cannot be gained on one's own efforts. The school of the Chan rejected book learning as the basis of enlightenment, set aside all notions and theories of suffering and salvation, and relied upon day-to-day events, simple thinking, and ordinary living as a means to enlightenment. Of these 2 schools, the school of the Chan became more popular within China because the Tang emperors liked it, and it also became attractive to the educated elite. Overall, Buddhism never really disappeared or excelled. It merely blended in with all the other religions present in China after what happened in 845. The persecution of Buddhism in 845 might have taken the wind out of the sails for spreading Buddhism in China, but Buddhism is still spreading across the globe. In fact, it is one of the most highly practiced religions throughout the world.